Hello, great people! Have you been looking lately for a new book to read on self-improvement and ran into Viktor Frankl's In Search of Meaning and wanted to hear someone else's opinion about it? Someone who has already read it? Well, that's what I'm here for. Let's get into the book, have it summarized a bit, and hear a bit about my experiences. See you there.
Have to join forces. Have to join forces.
Okay, let's start with how I found this book and why did I eventually choose to read it. So, I first found the book when I read about it in the book of Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, my latest review. In the book by Stephen Covey, there are 7 different habits, and each habit has really high value. Now, one of those habits, the first one, which is the base for all the rest, and is therefore a very important habit, is based on this book, In Search of Meaning, and Stephen Covey gives a reference to it. Then I also, when I was searching for other improvement books, I looked at a few lists of self-improvement books, blog posts, like top 100 self-improvement books and top 25 and some different blog posts like that. And those were the 2 places I found it in when I first became aware of it. I don't remember which one was first, but they were both the sources for me to find the book. Then those 2 sources were already a pretty good indication for me that this book was good, because Stephen Covey is the bestseller, and those top 100 lists included very good books that were bestsellers as well, and the fact that this book was included among those books in the top in some of the lists has made it pretty clear for me that this was a good book. But in addition to that, I also paid attention to the fact that the book is only 4 hours long and 44 minutes, because I chose to read it as an audiobook, or listen, if to be more precise. And besides those 3 things, what helped me, and always does help me, is the decision process that Patrick from Valuetainment developed. I actually put a link to it in the blog post, but also put it right here in the description. So in Patrick's decision process there are 4 main steps. The first step, it's more of 4 criteria by which to choose a book than steps. So the first criteria is the author. Who is the author? So I've checked who the author was in Wikipedia and found out that this was one of the founders of a theory called logotherapy, one of the founding fathers of psychology, a bit like Freud and Nietzsche. If you've heard of him, I hope you did. So this guy was quite important. The next criteria is subject. The subject was psychology. I don't usually read about psychology, but because the other factors pointed that this was a good book and could help me improve, this didn't matter much to me. Then there is the reviews criteria. To check that criteria, I read the reviews on Audible and saw that almost everyone rated it as 5 stars, at least on the first page, and that was enough for me. But also on top of that, I watched a YouTube video, a summary of the book. It also seemed interesting. And the last criteria was the credibility of recommender. So in this criteria, this is Stephen Covey. So this is a quite credible recommender and he's quite successful. So I chose to read this book. So that's the story about my choice process, and now let's summarize the 3 parts of the book in short. As you most probably figured out already, the story takes place in World War II period. Viktor Frankl tells about his experiences right from the beginning, in which he got accepted into the first death camp, until the end, in which he left his last death camp and got released. In this period of time, he describes many horrors, as the example of the fact that the prisoners were called upon by their numbers that were tattooed on their hands, and not by their names, and the loss of the value of human life. Another horrible condition that they were subjected to is the fact that a lot of times, in order for a person or his friend to survive, another person had to die. It was a 1-for-1 equation. All that situation presented a good chance for Viktor to make research in psychology and in the way people operate. So let's take 2 of the phenomenons that made him draw a few conclusions about the human nature during his experiences in the death camps. Let's start with the first phenomenon he observed. He observed that certain people didn't give up hope till the last day and always had something that held them, while other people just ran into the electric fence and therefore suicided, or just refused to wake up from their bed, and no hitting and no shouting wouldn't make them wake up or stand up. This phenomenon, as Viktor analyzes, is a result of the lack of meaning. Those people just didn't have anything to live for in the future. They didn't see anything for which they should stay. Therefore, he says that a meaning is a critical thing in a person's life. And then he quotes Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. That's the first conclusion. The second phenomenon that he experienced was that certain people, certain prisoners, acted as saints, while the others acted as swine. Some people were ready to give up their piece of bread to motivate another prisoner fellow, while the others were ready to steal other people's bread. While there is no place to judge those activities, this is just a certain example. There were other examples in which they acted a lot worse and a lot better. So the conclusion he drew from it eventually was that any person, even when taking the last of his freedoms, will always have the freedom to keep his point of view and how he looks at things. Those are 2 of his conclusions about human psychology during this period in the death camp. I would also like to say that this first part is a very illustrative part, and it allowed me to stay tuned the whole time, and it gave me the chills many times, and especially as a person who lives in Israel and whose country's story is tied to this period of World War II, this has made me very emotional. The other 2 chapters are more of professional knowledge chapters. While they refer to the first chapter in order to give examples, but they are more of explanatory chapters. The second one speaks about logotherapy, in general, the theory that Viktor developed, And the third one is another addition to the book. It was edited in 1984, 20 years after the book was written. And I have to admit that those two chapters are a bit hard to listen to because there are a lot of terms, and I personally had to stop every few seconds in order to write those terms and try to understand them better, because there were not too much examples and you couldn't understand the next example if you didn't understand the previous term, and it was a bit overwhelming. Therefore, I believe that it is better to get it in a paper version rather than in the audio version like I did. But you do whatever you decide is correct, of course. In general, I would say that the book is indeed interesting, especially the chapter number 1. It was hard to stop reading it, while chapter number 2 and 3 are hard to listen to, but nonetheless, they do contain a lot of gems of knowledge and are very educating. There are philosophies that are discussed and things about meaning of life. I didn't understand everything fully, but I'm sure that I will continue to understand it better and better with the time that passes and with the situations when I'll be encountered with those things he talked about. So that's it. That's my short review of this book by Viktor Frankl. It's not the greatest book I've ever read, but it is the book that is the basics of logotherapy, which is now used by many psychologists, and therefore I would not refrain from saying that it might most definitely be worth a read. So thank you for listening. The book is in the description below, as always, and don't forget to comment whatever you think of the book, whatever you think of this review. And I'm very glad to see you here, and see you in the next review.